storytelling, and modern entertainment journalism. Please, ladies and gentlemen,
A
with
round
a
of applause
resounding
for
clap innovation, help me make welcome
Damilare
Damilare
Akinrinde.
Akinrinde.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Damilare, as introduced, and I'll be the moderator for the panel Building a Global Audience and Shaping Strategies that African Media Companies Can Use. So I'm going to be introducing my fellow panelists. I think I'm going to take a seat. So my very first panel member is David Adeleke. I'm going to take his citation now as it comes forward. David is a writer and media entrepreneur whose work covers African business tech and the creative economy. He is the founder of Communique, a media and intelligence company focused on Africa's creative economy. Communique launched as a newsletter in 2020 and now has over 43,000 subscribers globally. A round of applause for David. David has extensive experience thinking, writing, and speaking about technology, the media, and creative industries. He has spoken at several conferences globally. A round of applause for David once more. Thank you, David, for joining us. All right. So my next panel member is Tayo Fagbule. A round of applause for Mr. Tayo Fagbule. He is the editor of Business Day, Nigerian leading business daily, with over a decade media experience. He was appointed editor in January 2021 after serving as editorial board chairman and deputy editor. Before journalism, he was the MBA director at Lagos Business School, where he also taught anthropology and business analysis in full-time MBA. Tayo holds a degree in economics from the University of Lagos and an MBA from Lagos Business School, Pan-Atlantic University, combining academic and professional experience in business, media, and education. A round of applause for. Our next panel member is Tolu Ogunlesi. Tolu Ogunlesi is a Nigerian journalist, author, and public servant known for his digital media expertise. He served as a special assistant on digital media to the President Muhammadu Buhari 2016 to 2023 and has established the Office of Digital Engagement. A two-time CNN Multi-Choice African Journalist Award winner, he holds a degree in pharmacy, University of Ibadan, and creative writing, University of East Anglia. His works include Listen to the Geckos Singing from a Balcony and Conquest and Conviviality. He is a Harvard and US State Department Fellow and is currently based in Adebanjo. Round of applause for David. My next panel member is Omotola Adebanjo. She's a seasoned multimedia journalist who began her career as a teenage club reporter with NTA in 1998. She currently serves as the editor of Gist Nigeria, a BBC and Channels TV co-production, and the members of the BBC. Formerly National Head of News at Silverbird Communications, she has reported 4 continents, and she has worked in PR and film under Tunde Kelani. She studied mass comm and trained at institutions including the BBC Academy. A published poet, she speaks English, Yoruba, Hausa, some French, and Igbo. Thank you very much for joining us today. All right. I think everybody is here, and one more person. My apologies. I'm so sorry, I'm going through my list. Yes, a round of applause for VWoke, Ighure. He is a seasoned business strategist with over a decade of experience broadcasting brand visibility and driving revenue for top corporations. With a master's degree in business, he blends strategic insights with a result-driven mindset to deliver impactful, growth-oriented solutions across industries. He is also the convener of the Family Business Summit, a platform committed to promoting sustainability, innovation, and growth in family-owned businesses across Nigeria at Press Reader. A round of applause for Mr. VWoke, everyone. All right, that was a mouthful. But I think again, welcome to my panel members, and thank you so much for the audience for listening with rapt attention. I think I'm going to start over from Mr. Tayo, and let's begin the very first question, and like, what are we here to talk about, which is, building a global audience, strategies for African media companies, and the role of technology. So first off, why is it important in the 21st century to build a global audience? Start.
I think it's, hello everyone. I think it's quite obvious. When we all woke up this morning, what was the first thing we reached out for? Your phone. You probably had your alarm, and after your alarm goes off, the next thing you scroll down and you're probably just checking your favorite websites or social media. Okay, and obviously what you're going to get at that instant, the moment you wake up, you're not going to just get news that's local, you're going to get news that's global just because it's your phone, it's connected to the internet, and you have access to the world in your hands. Now, for a media company, and the word media is important, that is the new medium. Whereas in the past, the medium was print, obviously. So it wasn't when I woke up in the morning that I picked up a paper. It was when I got to breakfast, or I had to go down if I subscribed and pick it up at my front door, or I wait till I get to the office when it's handed to me. But now, obviously, also because the media has changed, the medium has changed, it's digital, it's not tangible, it travels faster, obviously. And of course, it's 24-hour cycle. You can actually tell the difference between when you're awake in Nigeria and when America is awake on your social media timeline. So you already have access to all of these two worlds, multiple worlds, on one device at the same time. So that's the reality that we live in. So if you're going to be a news producer, if you're going to be in media today, you have to produce with that audience in mind.
Right.
So that's what we live in, and that's what we have to deal with, whatever we are, whether you're running your media company from your bedroom, or you're running it from we who are more like a traditional print media. That's the world, that's the audience you have to deal with. That's the audience, it's global.
Amazing, thank you so much, Mr. Taya. So moving on to my next panelist, I want to quickly touch on the idea of a storyteller, and the idea of being a journalist, and then the idea of shaping narratives across Africa. How do we tie all of that into building a global audience and understanding from an African storyteller or an African journalist what's like the most important thing I have to put at the back of my mind for being specific or being about building a global audience?
I think the first thing I would say is that all of the definition, you talked about being a journalist, and that definition is, unlike many other definitions, are under assault, in a sense. Right. Maybe not assault, but there's a questioning going on. Everything we assumed no longer matters. There was a media leaders summit just about 2 weeks ago in Abeokuta, where I had the privilege of being on a panel and interviewing, heads of like traditional media platforms, right, newspapers and all. And you can tell everybody is just struggling with what does it mean to be a journalist in this age, And you use the word storyteller, which is becoming more and more, nobody wants to. I don't even know, does anybody still want to be a journalist in this day and age? But at the end of the day, you then find that you as a journalist, you're competing with people who call themselves storytellers, because it's a contest of narratives at the end of the day. Forget all the fancy things about at the end of the day, we are competing for the attention of the same people, But so what I know he is going to jump in, but what the journalist then wants to do is to do that while still holding on to what you might call certain ethical, the ethics of journalism and all that. That's what at the back of your mind. That's what you want to do. Yeah, right. But your audience there, to be honest, they just, your audience wants content.
They do.
Your audience wants content.
So,
go ahead.
Look, I totally agree with you, but I think, and this is something, I think Nene mentioned it, and I think also James, if I'm correct, the keynote speaker, journalism and storytelling cross paths.
We're all storytellers.
Yes, but I don't tell fiction.
Yeah.
So that's, I tell stories with facts. So what's happening and what the danger that we're seeing, and of course with AI, and we're going to see that now, is that you're going to start also, even AI hallucinates, begins to fictionalize. It's not perfect, they're improving on it. So what you don't want is that in your storytelling, you veer off the path of fact. And then you now start, toying with fiction. Making things up because you want to tell a story. Tell the story with the facts. It's more demanding. Obviously, I would say this without the fact that before it became, before the internet age, and it was from the newspapers to the audience, it was one way. Maybe the storytelling was subpar. Okay? You had people who were great storytellers. I mean, I know this lady, she's in her 80s or 90s now, who used to write crime in Miami. And her goal was to write an introduction that will make you jump out of your seat. But she was writing about murder. Somebody has been shot, someone has been killed gruesomely in Miami, but the intro will make you jump out of your seat. Great storytelling, but with facts.
Right.
That I love. But just to come in there, that...
Yeah. So just quickly, to answer your question, the answer for me will be that we're in an age of self-questioning. I mean, for me, that's what defines the age, where we're asking ourselves questions. And, and the monopolies of old, where, as I always say, at 9 p.m. in 1994, all of Nigeria was watching NTA News.
Absolutely.
We didn't have any other thing to, that at 9 p.m.
That was the medium.
30 years ago, you were all watching NTA. Today, 2025 at 9 p.m., what's happening? In that same sitting room where everybody was watching NTA now, no two people are watching the same thing. Yeah. So for me, it just shows how stark the change and the fact that, the journalist, the storyteller, the skit maker, everybody now just competing for the same limited attention of people, and for me, I don't know how, but I think that's the foundation, accepting that world has changed and that we have to question all those assumptions, for me is the starting point for this conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tolu. I'm still going to come back to the fragmentation of content and how it's very hard to say a certain demographic of people at this particular time are watching this. But I'm still going to come back to that. This is an interesting conversation. Omotola, you're a trained journalist. You've worked with the BBC, you've worked with the NTA. Tell me, what are some of the strategies you have incorporated to build a global audience?
In 20 years ago, people outside Nigeria or outside Africa were interested in stories about the local hunter, things they don't see, things they don't know. But now, beyond that, people in America, in Europe, Americans, no, maybe not so much.
That's a shame.
Curious people from across the world want to know how do lawyers in Nigeria work? How does somebody who is a data analyst in Nigeria, how do they do their jobs? And change makers across Africa, how are they doing their job? So the needs of the audience is evolving. And any smart media organization evolves with that.
Right.
And that's what we do at the BBC. The values of the BBC, the core value, the number one used to be trust. Now it is audience. Because the audience are the core of what we do. So whatever you're doing, you have to be mindful of who your audience is. And there's no audience called everybody. You have to define your audience. Yeah. Whether you're a skit maker, whether you're a newspaper organization, even as a newspaper organization, you have different pages. Who are the audience for each of those pages? You have a TV station, you have a radio station, you have different programs. You have specificity is very important in defining your audience. And when you're able to define your audience and what they need, it becomes very easy. For Gist Nigeria, for instance, we tell stories that people don't tell. Stories that you would not see on the average Nigerian TV. For instance, this week, how many of you know that there's a new strain of polio virus in Nigeria?
Oh, wow.
It's vaccine-induced. Nobody's talking about it because there is no pandemic yet. Like 200 children have not died, but it's here. And it happens when an inoculated child, when they inoculate a child against polio, the polio virus becomes dormant. It's still there. So when that child goes to the stream to poop, the virus is there, and if a child drinks from the water from that, they get polio. And now, to vaccinate against that may be more difficult than vaccinating against the regular polio. So this is the story we are telling this week, because that is the story. That is what we represent. Telling stories that ordinarily you will not hear. Telling stories that you will ordinarily not see on TV. Using digital storytelling techniques. The lines are blurring, and the audience know it. People watch our show because they see on TV what they will see online. And that's very important. Because just Nigeria, in 2021, we had an audience of 80,000. By 2022, we grew by 1,400% to 1.2 million. Now we're averaging 5 million viewers every week because of the kind of stories that we tell. And we're able to do that because at editorial meetings every week, you pitch a story to me. We have a segment called Top Story. It's a national story. So you tell me, I want to do a story about, so I say, okay, if I'm in Bauchi, how does that story affect me? How is it my business? If I'm in Benue, how is it my business? And the thing is, think global, think global, act local. Yeah. So, and in telling our stories from Nigeria, we're not going to use the same language Westerners use. For instance, I'm not going to say Aigle is slum in Lagos. Aigle a low-income neighborhood in Lagos. The language is not just about the story idea. The language is also very important. How are you telling the stories? Because we're going to shape the perception about it's not the government that will do it. It's us, the media. And the words we use are very key. And I'm very mindful. I'm very particular. I'm old school. I started from the 90s. I started when the time they were talking about when at 9 o'clock, and in those days they would say, that small NTA girl, because we're like the king of everything. The information, whatever we like, that's what we tell people. But now everybody has information. They say we're gatekeepers. We're not keeping any gates anymore. The floodgate is opened.
It is.
So we're trying to survive. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Omotola. I'm really short of time, but I want to make sure I give everybody my questions. And we now banter a bit on formats, on newsroom, as well as, media relevance. Like, what metrics are we looking at to understand the market that were still relevant in the media market? David, I'm a huge fan of your newsletter, and I wanted to ask you what's sort of like the case study you've looked at in terms of building a global audience. And the comma to your question is the operations behind it. How do you build a global audience and make it sustainable? Go ahead.
Thank you very much for that. Hello, everyone. First of all, the thing that you said about polio is stressing me out already. I'm stressed already. I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that. But to your question, for us, for me, when I started, because at the beginning, it was just me.
One man.
Exactly. It was a one-man engine. I looked at a few Western examples because, to be honest, when I looked around me, I didn't really see anyone at the time who was doing for instance, our newsletter for today went out 15 minutes ago. There are more examples now. The newsletter is actually about the newsletter business in Africa. You should read it. Right. But at the time, there were not that many examples, so I had to look to the West for inspiration. So I looked at people like Ben Thompson, Sarah Fisher of Axios and all of that, which I've said many times. But what was very important for me was how can we talk about the media, at the time it was just the media, right? The media industry in Africa in a way that is relevant to the local audience, but also relevant to maybe someone in the US who is interested. So those are the hard questions that we had to ask ourselves. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that you can't really talk about the media in a way that is at least relatable to a global audience without really looking at the creator economy, because as we all realize now, they were saying, journalist, storyteller, we can argue about ethics and all of that. At the end of the day, we are all serving similar, maybe not the same audience, but we are serving very similar audiences, right? We see people literally move from news accounts on Twitter to comedy accounts to entertainment accounts on the same app. So we are all serving very similar audiences. So those are the things that we had to think about. But what we've seen now is, as you establish domain expertise in a particular subject, people tend to gravitate towards you. So our newsletter, for instance, now is, if you want to understand, there is no other platform, and this is not a boast, I'm just stating facts, please. There is no other platform on this planet that writes about the media and the creative economy the way we do. You can attest to that. Thank God you read the newsletter. Right. So what we've seen now is, because we occupy a very unique space in the ecosystem, there are certain stories that will not be told if we don't tell them. And there are certain stories that will not be told in the ways that they are told if we do not do it the way that we do it, or ask the questions that we are asking. So what that means is, anyone from any part of the world who is interested in this subject, in this region, they know where to go to. The other part of it now is discovery. As anybody who has worked in media understands, content is 40% of the problem. The remaining 60% is distribution. So how do we now get in front of the right people? That's why we decided on the newsletter format. The newsletter format means that I don't have to be afraid of what Mark Zuckerberg will wake up and do tomorrow. You understand? As long as I have your email, I can communicate with you directly. If we decide today now that we are moving from Substack to Beehive or to MailChimp, we have your email address, we have a direct relationship with you. And also, what that allows us to do is to know where you are. Sorry, I'm taking time. To know where you are reading or where you are consuming our content from. So now, for instance, the geographical distribution of our audience informs the subjects that we cover. So we can't cover very hyper-local stories anymore, as much as we would like to, because now, for instance, 25% of the people who read our newsletter live in the US, UK, and Canada. I have to be able to explain to them something that is happening in Nigeria in a way that is relevant to them. And this 25% is not diaspora people, though. It's you understand? And they don't look like me. They don't have my cultural orientation. So I have to be able to explain this thing that they are interested in, right, to them in that way. And so that means, again, it's a long thing, but I hope I've been able to at least answer a bit of your question.
Awesome. I have a follow-up question for you, but before I come to that, let me move to Mr. VWoke and bring him into the conversation as regards strategies for building a global audience. I wanted to ask you, right now, what platform are you looking at in terms of telling a story? And are you a multi-platform person, or your approach is towards one platform to build my global audience?
That's a very long question. Can you ask it again, please?
So what's your approach to building a global audience? Do you think it should be one platform or multi-platforms?
Okay, to answer your question, I feel like you can't have one platform these days, right? It has to be multiple platforms, because the way this content has now been democratized. As Tolu had said earlier, before everyone used to be gathered around television at 9 o'clock to watch NTA news. Now, at 9 o'clock is too late. From like 7 o'clock, people have started. In fact, all day, people are actually doing all sorts of things. And if you're going to start to create content for a global audience, obviously, newsrooms have to be reorganized. So the way it is, the skill sets within the newsroom have to be reorganized as well, or have to be different. And even the roles. Before, I think journalists had to be someone who studied mass communication, but now it's different. I'm sure, as Tayo speaks, he'll tell you about his experience, at Business Day, where the way it is now, they don't longer hire like mass comm graduates per se, but they look at people maybe who studied economics, because there are certain skill sets that you require to be able to interpret, stories. Whether it's a storyteller, whether it's a journalist, you must be able to analyze. You must have analytical skills to be able to create content that people will value. And then if you're going to start looking at that value, then you now have to think of how do you monetize the value that you have created. Whether it's storytelling, whether it's a journalism or a journalist article or a press release, the point is that there's an audience. The question now is, how do you create value for that audience to ensure that they stay glued to your platform?
Awesome, thank you very much. So let me quickly go into our banter questions and talk about writing headlines. I think this is like I don't want to say it's a nightmare for everybody these days, because like that's the first thing that captures everybody's attention. But I want to now talk about right now for local audience. Do you think certain platforms, I don't want to say Instablog, but certain platforms are dictating how newsrooms are approaching writing their headlines? So let me start with.
Yeah, I think they are, because obviously, as we said, you're speaking to the same people. So I'll tell you what happens in the newsroom at business day.
Go ahead, please.
At a certain time of the day, after the meeting in the morning, we have an editorial meeting every morning, and then in the afternoon we have another one to decide on the headlines. So there's a joke in-house, like, okay, fine, how street is that headline?
How street?
How street? Okay.
Yeah.
It's called. I mean, and this is traditional journalism. So go into the newsroom. It's called the idiot test. Ask anyone this word if they're familiar with it. If they're familiar with it, whether it's an acronym or a word, it goes. Okay. So once we had and we're business. Sorry, we cover business and it can get technical and a lot of jargon. And we were struggling with the headline. And the person who wrote the story, her 12-year-old daughter was there. And I said, you know what? I'm going to run the idiot test by her. And I just asked her, so do you know what this is? She's a very bright girl. No, she doesn't know. And I asked her, what do you think would be more? And she gave a better word. We used her headline.
Nice.
So, while, yes, you're struggling for attention, I'll say those websites that you mentioned, obviously, can distract, but I want the attention of that same person to read me. So I have to speak language that they're familiar with, and it starts with the headline. So it has to be, and it's been basic of journalism, as I said. So you have to make it appealing, you have to make it punchy, you have to make it short. Even there's a word count for our headlines. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So once you're pushing past, for me, 8 is the sweet spot.
Interesting.
8 words, 8 short words, even the number of syllables.
Okay.
Single syllable better, because it's stronger.
Right.
Yes, so because it goes straight to you, and because look, the person who's reading you there's a WhatsApp message that's come through. There's someone trying to tell them, someone's calling them. There's something on the TV. There's something in the background.
Right.
So you want to capture that attention and retain that attention immediately. So the number of words that are familiar with streets, it must be streets, so that they're familiar with it, and then obviously very memorable, because the moment you're doing past 3 syllables, you're asking the person to start processing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you
Very
so much.
important.
I want to bring David to the conversation of the headlines and talk about right now. You write a long form newsletter, if I'm correct. Are you worried are people reading this long thing I write?
I'm not worried at all.
You're not worried at all?
I'm not, because I've seen, that Rick and Morty thing. I've seen what makes you, your booze mean nothing to me. I've seen what makes you cheer. So I've seen what moves the people I'm trying to reach. I know what they read. I know that these people, most of the time, these are people who they usually set apart a portion of their time and their day to sit. And I know this because I have conversations with these people regularly. So the person who opens, scrolls, that's not my audience.
Right.
That's not the person I'm trying to serve. The person I'm trying to serve is a Tolu Ogunlesi who probably wake up at 7 a.m. on Saturday.
Right.
You have these routines, right? I want to read these things. Like I have a list of things I want to read, because again, you read the newsletter, so you understand the insight density per newsletter is very heavy. You cannot just read it and go.
Yes.
You have to sit. I have people who tell me we were in a board meeting and we printed. I have these stories. So those are the people I am writing for. So I am not worried at all, because there will always be those people.
Amazing.
I think to David and sorry, Tolu. Look, let's be clear. Yes, attention spans are tricky because of the media, the way we consume media. But
right.
Really, and I tell my people who can binge Netflix.
Right. I mean, but you're sitting.
So there's the binging series. So they have their attention. So
Okay.
if you can write that same very, very good content,
Right.
you will get that attention. So it's not about that. It's about finding content that will match that attention. It has to be outstanding. It has to be
Amazing.
superb.
Everybody wants to talk. I know why matter session. But I want to quickly bring Omotola in. You share your point, and then my question to you is, in terms of TV formats, and then bringing your audience, your content to digital, what's like a minus plus situation that you look at to understand that, oh, we know we're going to do broadcast on channels and BBC and everything, right? But we're still going to bring this to digital audience. Like, what are your minus and plus whenever you're doing your editing and newsroom and you know, your...
Just like, you know what I said about specificity earlier on about your audience?
Right.
You know, it allows you not to panic. That's why he's not panicking.
Right.
Because you understand his audience. And I see a lot of people online who they started with something and they panicked because they're not sure of who their audience is.
That's it.
And the thing about, broadcast, our show is 25 minutes, 25 for 30. We have 4 segments. The first one is 8 minutes. The second segment is about 3 minutes.
Right.
And the third and fourth, and we have 5 stories in all. And the last 3 stories is 25 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and 3 minutes. The 8-minute story, we have a digital version of it. It's 2:10 because it has to be on X.
Aha.
Yeah. So it's condensed. But the thing about it is, when you look at even the 8 minutes, sometimes I'm even previewing, and I'm like, are you sure this story is 8 minutes? It seems like it's just 2 minutes.
Right.
And that's because of the way it's edited. It's digital storytelling format, infographics, and even the resource people, which is part of what we do at Just Nigeria to ensure that the people we talk to are young people, people you watch and can connect with. Somebody's talking about business, and it's somebody your age, and you're like, okay, I want to listen to. He's not some old guy or somebody's from some. There's nothing wrong with old people, you know.
Amazing. So before I bring you in, Tolu, please start sending in your questions. I've been given a note, even though I have much more touch points. But yeah, Tolu, you want to say something? Go ahead.
You know, the question about headlines just quickly made me think about, when you mentioned the Insta blog, and it just made me think about how, I think some people assume that these things are fairly new. And I'm thinking about Weekend Concord. And then the Yoruba newspapers, Aláròyé and Co.
Right.
Their headlines were, Instablog is learning work, with those.
Oh wow.
With those headlines,
actually.
So for me, I think what one fundamental thing is that while the technologies will always change, human nature is consistent. And what is that human nature? Okay, we like gossip. That's will always be. What David was saying about your audience confidence. There has always been a space for human beings to obsess with a niche, so that for some people it's Star Wars.
Right.
You know what I mean? It will always be. If I decide tomorrow that I want to start a religion and I say that God is a cat, I can tell you that by this time next year, I could have 1 million people from the corners of the world, because human beings have always been wired to form cliques based on, so people will tribes. So there will be a communique cult. It's a cult.
I hope there is one.
It's a cult. So understanding that human beings will always be cultic, even though technology, AI will come and go, as the keynote said, people are going back to print, to vinyl, to all that stuff. Technology will change.
Right.
But that's fundamental human nature of being cultic, of being liking gossip, of all that will never change.
Amazing, Tolu. So I want to bring Mr. VWoke into the conversation in terms of your personal consumption and and your output of your newsroom. How do you manage both relationships to make sure you are still on your goals and your targets and whatever insights that you're trying to push out there?
Well, I mean, there are tools out there that you can always use. AI is one go-to. I mean, everybody uses AI these days, so that's what I pretty much use personally.
Tell me about that. How do you use AI to shape your consumption, and then
so
that
let me
also helps you out?
So let me speak a bit about what I actually do, because the introduction was a bit. There's some things I was just wondering. Okay, was that me? Are you describing me? Okay, so I work for a company called Press Reader. We're based in Vancouver, Canada. So what we do is we function like Netflix. So we curate newspapers and magazines from around the world and in digital format. So the way you have your replica, the way you read your typical hard copy newspaper, we would put it in a digital format. And we work with like some of the biggest publishers. So one thing that we have done recently using AI is to get AI to summarize the, like a news article. So you don't have to read an article that maybe Tayo has written from A to Z. You just, once the platform recognizes that you're interested in maybe Donald Trump, it would make sure that every morning when you wake up, it has summarized all Donald Trump stories, the top ones from around the world, for you to be able to consume. So that way, you manage your time better and you stay informed in spite of having an app that has over 7,500 titles.
Amazing. All right, do we have any question from the audience? Questions as regards building a global audience, as regards strategies for a media company, or starting one or sustaining one? We have one. All right, so we have a gentleman at the back. Is it a lady or a gentleman? It's a gentleman. All right.
Thank you very much. My question is for Tayo Fagbule and Tolu Ogunlesi. I just want to know, is there still an efficient gatekeeping, right, in media and journalism? Is there still efficient gatekeeping? And I'm asking this question because, let me go a bit personal. Like the first time I came across Tolu Ogunlesi's name, I think it was in 2009, 2010, when we had Next newspapers. And there was a story you wrote then. I finished reading the story. I think it was about this serial bomber guy, Omotola, yeah. And then I finished reading the story. Like, it was later I checked who the writer was. And then that was the first time I knew Tolu Ogunlesi, and I followed you all through the years. Now, the challenge, why I'm asking this question is because, and I'm not even saying this because David is here, the lacuna between storytelling and journalism, I think it's way gone, right? It's only platforms like David's own, and it's because sometimes it goes a little bit humanistic, like it focuses on certain persons so you can trace it. So it's not so easy for, I'm a millennial, so the people that are Gen Z, for instance, have a different concept about media and journalism compared to the millennials. So I'm asking this question because I'm seeing a future where you see someone like Tayo, for instance, or Tolu, and then another Gen Z person who is doing very well in that space, and then they have different orientations. So is there efficient gatekeeping still going on in journalism? Thank you.
I think there's a lot of struggle.
Well, there is gatekeeping, and I think, I'll talk from experience. If I understand you correctly, to answer the question, is that we're journalists, okay? And we're going to tell stories, and the stories have to be able to hold water. So there are some tenets that you are going to abide by that they will not change. Because also, as Tolu said, humans will be humans. Yes, we'll be tribe-like, we will gravitate towards this, but we're also looking for certainty. Now, if you listen to what the keynote speaker said, there's a lot of AI is disrupting a lot of things for good and for ill also, which is why there's also people are coming back to the traditional media for certainty, for grounding. Why? Because you know that human beings are the one, however subjective, however in a hurry to write that first chapter of history, but that abide by tenets that say you must quote someone who can be verified, you must fact check. AI doesn't do that. Okay, AI just goes, maybe eventually it will, but at the end of the day, there's just that gravitation again, us being humans, for something that, look, I know this, and I can hold somebody responsible as well for this. I know this is real, I know it's written by a human being, I know they've gone through some tenets, and if where they go wrong, I can hold them accountable. So those tenets still hold, whether the media has changed, whether the consumption habits have changed, whether the type of storytelling has changed, but those tenets still hold and guard. Okay, personal example, we published something recently, and someone sent an opinion piece, and the advertising agency of that company that was written about wrote back to us and said, look, A, B, C, D, E. And my publisher wrote me a very strong message. And he said, you know what? We have to be, and again, he went back to the tenets. Fact-checked, who is this person, whether it's a pseudonym, does the person exist? We have to check that and all of that. And we had to write an apology. So that confidence, yes. That confidence that the agency knows I can hold somebody responsible for this, and we're like, okay, nice. So we have to even raise the bar in terms of getting stories or a random email from someone. So it continues. I mean, this just happened recently, to answer your question.
So I'll just quickly jump in and say, yeah, the gates are completely down. You know, as you said, the gates are down, the walls are down, everything is down. But those journalistic ethics and tenets, and the thing is that, we must understand why those things exist in the first place. Yeah. If you have ever been the subject of a one-sided story,
thank you.
If you have ever ended up on Instablog or somewhere, or
a narrative,
Gist Lover, you need to talk to, you have to talk to the people who have ended up on Gist Lover with a one-sided story to understand that these so-called ethics exist. There's a purpose, they're necessary. That's what protects society. That's what, keeps us. Imagine if we took this same attitude to the court, to justice, and said, all this prosecutor and defender.
Cyberbullying.
Huh?
Cyberbullying.
Yeah. So if we took that, I even mean
the abuse of
in the legal system.
So now you have people being picked up randomly because people are saying, you know what, you've maligned me.
You've maligned, yeah. But I'm even saying that in the justice system where you're supposed to have a judge, a prosecutor, a defender, imagine tampering with that setup. Meaning that maybe somebody has just a prosecutor, no defender. So it doesn't, that's unthinkable.
All right.
That's the same thing we should think about for journalism and for storytelling.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. We did not even talk about technology. This was a very good panel. I'm so sorry.
About gatekeeping, please, especially for young journalists, don't wait for your editor. Start doing the gatekeeping yourself. Fact check. Always fact check.
Before you wreck yourself.
Yes, always. Because even though, who knows Isioma Daniel? You remember Isioma Daniel? Isioma Daniel, when Nigeria was going to host Miss World, she was one that wrote something about the prophet, and they almost burned down Kano because of what she wrote. I never forgot her name. It's almost 30 years ago, but it's still there. So do the fact checking yourself first. It's very important. And you have to, the lines are very clear. And not everybody is a journalist. I don't know, Instablog is not a media, is not a journalistic media organization in my estimation. Because you cannot do, but that's what everybody reads. And they say breaking news. You can't break news. It's not your job to break news. You are spreading gossip. So what are you breaking? Really?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. My panel, David, VWoke.
Please, a round of applause for this panel session.